Hi, before getting into colonial America more, I want to take a step back and a detour and talk a little bit more about this handout on the shape of U.S. history. Um, I'll expect you to be able to reproduce this thing and elaborate on it in the midterm exam. And so I want to go over it again now a little bit. Um, History is complicated. I've already indicated that. All kinds of things, one thing after another. And sometimes it's hard for people to make sense of it all. And one trick that historians have developed is to sort of cut the history, the flow of things, up into periods. And that's what these boxes represent, different periods of time that help us to make sense of the history of the United States. Um, so if you have a mess in your room or in your house, sometimes it's useful to set up boxes. Okay, so we put stuff in this box and that's for this room, and stuff in this box and that's for that purpose, and so forth. And so these are boxes that historians set up and put them in order, and then various facts and realities go into one box or another. And at the same time, certain problems, certain issues, certain realities that you can find developing in one period of time, they flow into the next period and the next period and so forth. But it helps to have some way of sort of separating things out and dividing them up. So, um, the colonial era, and now before the colonial era, there were Europeans, there were Africans, there were Native Americans, but they're coming together on the soil of North America. Um, Begins the colonial era, and in particular, the British decided to set up certain colonies in North America. 13 colonies ultimately were set up, and they started doing that in the early 1600s. So that beginning in the early 1600s and going to 1775, that's what historians often call the colonial era. And then that ends with the American Revolution, 1775 to 1783. Although it's only 1776 that the colonies declare that they are independent, United States of America. What they set up is not a democracy, and they were not claiming to set up a democracy. Some of the founding fathers were not in favor of a democracy, but what they were in favor of was government by elected representatives. They were in favor of a republic. Some of them wanted to keep it an undemocratic republic, white male property owners. Some hoped to go beyond that, but in any event, there were a number of things that happened in this period of time, 1783 to 1820, is the period of time that we are calling the early republic. Now, different historians may divide things up a little differently, have different labels, but this will do for our purposes. Um, we're going to explore in the next class or two what happened in the antebellum period, the antebellum era that led to the Civil War. Anti-war, anti-racist means you're against war, you're against racism, anti. But this is anta before, and bellum, these are Latin words. Antebellum, bellum stands for war, means war in Latin. The Civil War ripped this country apart. It was a devastating conflict. Afterwards, there was a necessity of reconstructing the country. And you have the Reconstruction era that overlapped with the Gilded Age, the Golden Age, the glittering age where immense wealth was being created because of the industrialization of the United States, the deepening and acceleration of that industrialization. And we'll be looking at that more later, of course. We'll be looking at all of these things later. Now, there are various problems that developed in the Gilded Age. And those problems generated great discontent. And the progressive era, from 1900 to 1920, those are the dates we're giving, that they involved various efforts to bring about reform, to change things for the better, to make progress. Now, one bad thing that happened during the Progressive Era was World War I. There were a number of things, good and bad, that happened during that period of time. And then, of course, come the 1920s. And it's easy enough to just give it that label, the 20s, sometimes the roaring 20s, because there were gangsters like Al Capone and so forth. There was, do you like to drink? Some people like to drink, but alcohol was outlawed in 1919 by constitutional amendment. So those who wanted to drink had to do it outside of the law, and that generated tremendous crime. Now, also another aspect of the 20s was great prosperity and all kinds of contradictions relating to that. And ultimately, 1929, the country went into a nosedive economically, the Great Depression. What brought the Great Depression to an end, because it wasn't just a US phenomenon, it was a global phenomenon, but what brought the world out of the Great Depression was something terrible, and that was the Second World War. Um, After the Second World War, there was a confrontation and a global power struggle between the United States and the Soviet Union, the communist bloc, and the capitalist nations, and that is called the Cold War era. And I've decided to just use that for a very expansive period of time in which all kinds of things were happening. Um, Most of you were born in 1990 or the 1990s, early 1990s, and you were born in what I would call a new period of time after the end of the Cold War. Uh, I'm going to use the term the age of globalization, and some historians are starting to use that term. And then afterwards, I think we are now entering a new phase, and I don't know what to call it yet. But in any event, this, I think, can be helpful as we try to make sense of the grand sweep and swirl of American history. So we'll be referring to this more later. I now want to talk, as I promised to do a few minutes ago, about the certain aspects of the colonial era that then led the colonies into the American Revolution. But let me do that in the next segment that I'm going to present to you.